Part 5 of Work of the Sisters During the Epidemic of Influenza, October 1918, by Francis Edward TOURSCHER. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Part 5. Sisters of St. Joseph, relief work of the Sisters of St. Joseph in emergency hospitals, general hospitals, and institutions. October 8, Emergency Hospital No. 3, Philopatrian, seems to hold the honor of having been the first to be placed under the charge of the Sisters of St. Joseph. The charge was given by His Grace, the Most Reverend Archbishop, following many appeals for relief from city authorities. On the afternoon of October 8th, the day before the meeting of religious superiors at the Archbishop's residence. On the morning of the 9th of October, 1411 Arch Street was still furnished for its purposes as the home of the Philopatrian Club. At 10:00 p.m. of the same day, the furnishings of the clubhouse had been changed for the equipment of a modern hospital. Among the first patients received here were 18 U.S. Army men belonging to Division 8 Motor Supply Train from Baltimore. From the time of its opening, October 9, to its closing, October 30, 1918, 50 Sisters of St. Joseph served in this emergency hospital. This number includes substitutes. The Sisters had orders to report the first symptoms of illness. 7 Sisters were sent from this emergency to the community hospital in the Mother House at Chestnut Hill. One of them died. The sister nurse, first nurse in charge, was taken to the Mother House ill after about a week's service and was for many days at the very door of death. One case of overcoming prejudice among the Army men deserves notice here. One of these men, a Catholic, seeing with satisfaction how comfortable his companions were made by the care of the Sisters, said to one of the religious that he had had to endure much that was humiliating and an insult to religion from his fellows in camp. One of the chief points of controversy turned upon our Catholic sisterhoods. A general impression among non-Catholics was that the Sisters are, at the very best, a useless ornament in human society. We were all very sick men, the Catholic in uniform concluded, when we came here. We have been lying around City Hall, waiting to be taken in somewhere. When I saw that we struck the Sisters, going round putting water bottles and ice bags to us, and bathing and making everybody feel some ease from suffering, I could hardly wait till I got a chance to say, "Hey, fellas, what good are they? When we get out of this, they will have nothing to say but what is good about the Sisters." Another Army man, asked by one of the priests how the Sisters treated them, answered, "Fine, they treat us like our mothers." These soldiers were very evidently sincere in their expressions of gratitude when they left the hospital. Moreover, every man in the detachment, including non-Catholics, before leaving the hospital, asked for and received a badge of the Sacred Heart, which they had seen given to Catholic patients. Some of the men during their illness edified the Sisters by perseverance in memorizing prayers and aspirations for the hour of death, which they requested to be taught, after observing the practice among their Catholic fellow sufferers. St. Columba's Emergency Hospital. This emergency hospital was opened when the epidemic was at its height in St. Columba's beautiful parish school, as authorized by the Archbishop. It was intended at first for the people of the parish only, but later all were admitted from other parishes and all races and denominations. 12 Sisters of St. Joseph, teachers in the school, volunteered to care for the sick, though only one of these had had the advantage of any hospital training. 100 cases of influenza were treated here, and there was not one death, though some were sent later to sanitariums to recuperate. 5 doctors were in attendance, and they called it the Banner Hospital of the city. In one family, the mother died at her home, leaving the father with 9 children. The father, in gratitude for care given the children, told the Sisters that if he ever became a millionaire, he would leave half his wealth to them, a crude way, perhaps, of expressing real and sincere goodness of heart. However, the Sisters have decided to build no air convents on the promise. The 9 kiddies will have a first claim. The Sisters at St. Columba's went out also, when required, to care for the sick in private homes. Some of these cases of district nursing deserve notice as illustrating again the conditions of the afflicted and some symptoms of the disease. One case is reported in which the Board of Health had forbidden anyone to enter the house. The father and 3 children were brought to the hospital, leaving the mother's dead body to be attended to at home. Sores and vermin called for the sisters' immediate attention. St. Patrick's Hospital, Emergency, No. 8. The decision to turn over St. Patrick's Hall, 511 South 21st Street, for the use of an emergency hospital was reached about noon on October 9. Volunteers from the parish cleaned the building and fitted it for its new purpose in the service of humanity. At 11:00 a.m. on the following day, October 10, the first patient was admitted. Before midnight of that same day, 80 patients had been received in St. Patrick's Emergency. Every section of the city was represented, and all creeds and colors. The nursing was in charge of 3 graduate nurses. The burden of the nursing was assumed by 18 Sisters of St. Joseph from St. Patrick's School and other parishes. 17 students from the seminary gave their services as orderlies. The spiritual needs of patients were under the care of the clergy at St. Patrick's. 154 cases were admitted during the 18 days that the hospital was in operation, 60 in the women's ward, 37 in the men's ward, and 57 in the children's ward. There were 34 deaths. 15 of these occurred in less than 24 hours after admission. There were no deaths during the last 9 days of the hospital's operation. Dr. Wilmer Cruzen, Director of Public Health and Charities, from whose report the above points were drawn, says, "We are justly proud of our low mortality." A sister who was in the service at St. Patrick's Emergency, recounting her experience and impressions, writes, "I saw conditions beyond the power of description. It is one thing to read or hear of suffering, quite another to behold it in reality. About the hall were arranged cots containing men on the first floor, women and children on the second. Nearly every race and condition were there represented. The police brought in the cases just as they found them, from the homes of the afflicted off the street." Among the patients cared for tenderly by the sisters was a Stone man, who stated that he had been an industrious agent in distributing the menace and anti-Catholic prints of the same stamp. After witnessing the unselfish devotedness evidenced in the work of the sisters in this hospital, he proclaimed emphatically, with a bit of unconscious profanity, that he had done with such traffic, that for the future he had no common cause with anyone who would dare to speak against the Church or Catholic sisterhoods, whose work he had now seen, whose character and practical charity were proven to him by facts in a way which no language of the vendors of sensation, muckrakers, enemies of religion, and strangers to human charity could ever disprove or counteract. Holmesburg, Emergency No. 1. October 9th came a call from the acting secretary of the Archbishop for help to be given at Emergency Hospital No. 1, Holmesburg, where the city authorities, appealing to the Archbishop for aid and relief, said that conditions were appalling. In response to this call, 8 Sisters of St. Joseph from St. Anne's and 7 from the Ascension were detailed for relief work at the Holmesburg Hospital. The Sisters made themselves generally useful in the work of caring for the sick. They washed the patients, combed their hair, took temperatures, pulse, and respirations, made up beds, carried trays, swept the wards day and night from October 9th to October 25th. The nurse in charge says, writing to the superiors of the sisters who gave their services, "It has meant a great deal to us to have the sisters here to help us. They have done splendidly in the wards, and we are sorry to see them go. I do not know what we would have done without their help. I thank you for your splendid help and cooperation." A like letter was sent also to the Sisters of the Immaculate Heart and the Sisters of Notre Dame at Tacony. One of the sisters, writing to her superior, expresses what probably describes quite accurately the thought and the feeling of most of the generous volunteers. When called to these new duties, she says, for which few of the sisters had any special training, there was a feeling of dread and apprehension, not of the contagion, but of fear lest inexperience and lack of training result in failure and render our efforts ineffective. As usual, with good intentions, the Lord has taken care of results. This sister gives some valuable facts, impressions, and personal experience which help us to see conditions as they were, the attitude of city officials, and the dispositions of the poor afflicted patients. Entering the next ward, she writes, the sisters were overwhelmed with pity and compassion at the sight of the sufferers. Many of them were so discolored as to seem black in the face. The sisters were assigned to different phases of work, some to take temperatures, others to prepare ice caps and hot water bags and refreshing drinks, others to prepare the diet, and others to give medicines. These definite assignments made the work more methodical and brought conditions under control. Patients were being brought in by the police and others in trucks, ambulances, and wagons, and by nightfall the ward was nearly filled, probably October 9, and a number of extreme cases had died. There was then only one orderly in the place, and the dead often lay for some time, waiting to be removed. At 6:30 p.m., the Sisters of St. Joseph gave place to the Sisters of the Immaculate Heart, who were on night duty. The shifts were 12 hours until October 18, at the earliest, when there was a meeting of the representatives of the sisterhoods at Holmesburg, advised by the Archbishop, to talk over the problem of shortening the hours of service to 8, making 3 shifts. The compiler has been unable to uncover the results of this meeting. Shorter hours would mean more sisters to serve. This, in the face of numbers depleted by sickness in the various communities, was the real problem to be solved. On the second day, the sisters found that many of the first day's patients had died during the night. On this same day, Dr. Cruzen and several other physicians visited the hospital. The doctor spoke to each sister personally and expressed his gratitude for their services, saying that the Archbishop had done much to lessen the spread of the epidemic by giving the sisters permission to serve. On the third day, a number of firemen came from the Holmesburg firehouse and gave the sisters much-needed help. About the end of the second week, the number of patients began to decrease, so that one of the nurses exclaimed, "Sister, can you believe it? An hour has passed without the entrance of a new case." With the exception of 2 Mexicans, all the patients were most eager to be waited on by the sisters, and were also very grateful to them. Even the Jews and Protestants would repeat, like little children, the prayers and aspirations suggested by the sisters, who were, of course, careful not to obtrude on any patient prayers likely to be against his sentiments. Nearly all the non-Catholics wished to have a badge of the Sacred Heart, and one Protestant said to a sister that no amount of money would induce him to part with it. Mount Sinai Hospital. October 13, at the request of the civil authorities, sent through His Grace the Most Reverend Archbishop, 8 sisters went to Mount Sinai Hospital. One detail went early in the morning. When the second detachment arrived, the superintendent said, "The sisters are upstairs and working very hard. It's quite a change from the society ladies who were here last week." After putting the nurse's garb over their habit, the sisters went into the wards and to the private rooms. To their surprise, the sisters found many of the nurses Catholics, and all were cordial and friendly. For 2 weeks, the sisters attended the hospital all day. During that time, they baptized 2 children, and by request a woman. One of the nurses baptized a boy of 12 who desired it. The effect of the sisters' presence in the wards was very noticeable. One nurse said, "The nurses were talking last evening about the sisters, and saying that when they entered the wards, everything became quiet. I did not believe it at first, but now I have seen it." The sisters took up all ordinary nurses' work. They helped all through the hospital, in the wards for both men and women. During the first week, about 6 patients died every day. In the second week, the death rate was lower. Waiting on one man, a Jew, the sisters heard him softly humming the air of Catholic hymns, especially Jesus the All-Beautiful. As he grew better, he wanted the sisters to talk to him, and he told them he had been educated by the Christian Brothers in New York. A sister suggested prayer to him. He answered that he felt sure God never intended him to be a Christian. However, when he was leaving the hospital, he said, "Sister, pray for me, and I in return will always ask the great Jehovah to bless you for all you have done for us here." He told the sisters that as he watched them going about through the ward, he thought of a story the brothers had told the boys, of a religious who had gone out to walk in the streets, intending thus to preach a lesson to people by his modesty and recollected demeanor. For Jewish Hospital, see report of St. Mary's Academy, Sisters of St. Joseph. St. John's Nursery, Emergency Hospital No. 4. This hospital was opened October 9 at 3:30 p.m. At 9:30 there were 19 patients, and October 11 it had 40 patients. These were all children. 7 of them were baptized at the hospital. One child was brought by a Jewish father. As the sister received it, she saw it was dying. She immediately baptized it, and the poor father took the dead body away with him. A children's hospital, a branch of St. John's Day Nursery, was opened at 1216 Vine Street. Here were received infants and children up to the age of 7. There was a strange medley of races and nationalities. Jews were numerous. Several Jewish babies were baptized who died. The little tots took great delight in blessing themselves and babbling aspirations. The Catholic Home, 29th and Allegheny Avenue. In the Catholic Home there were 259 cases of sick children. 6 of these died of pneumonia. 5 of the sisters in charge of the children were also very sick, but sisters from other houses were sent to the rescue, thus saving the lives, the Superior says, of many of the children. The physician in charge of the Catholic Home was astonished, he said, at the way the sister teachers adapted themselves to the work of nursing, and how exactly his orders were carried out. Sometimes he came at 1 a.m. to 3 a.m., yet always found these nurses on night duty. He said, "I am a 32nd degree Mason, but I must say I have never seen such devotion as the sisters lavish on these poor orphans." Villanova College. October 10, 8 sisters were detailed for relief work at Villanova College, where 8 trained nurses were overworked attending to the sick in the seminary, St. Mary's Hall, and Tollentine Academy for boys under 16. Conditions in the college SATC were then quite under control. In St. Mary's Hall, there were 53 cases of influenza out of 69 students, and 3 priests resident in the building. 3 students died: Albert Starr, a deacon, John Dorgan, professed, and Gilbert Clunk, novice. Altogether, 75 cases were treated in St. Mary's Hall, the junior students being brought over from the preparatory school for better convenience in nursing and attention. A diet kitchen was established in St. Mary's Hall, and the sisters turned their attention and energy to every phase of emergency work: cooking, washing, in bathtubs there was no laundry in the building, cleaning rooms and corridors, and relieving the nurses in the care of the sick night and day. There were 18 beds in the community room, classrooms were filled, and cots set up in the reception halls, and 4 cots in the vestibule. The sisters who served here were 2 from Mount St. Joseph, Chestnut Hill, 2 from Our Mother of Consolation, Chestnut Hill, 2 from St. Charles Church, Philadelphia, 2 from Our Mother of Sorrows, Philadelphia. Sisters of Mercy. Misericordia Hospital was, of course, the chief care and burden of the Sisters of Mercy during the epidemic. As in all the other hospitals, it was necessary to call in outside help. 141 cases of the influenza were admitted to Misericordia Hospital during the epidemic from September 16 to November 10. Of these, 22 developed pneumonia, and of the 141 cases, there were 30 deaths. All the sisters who could be spared from parish schools and the 2 academies were needed at the hospital. 19 of the Sisters of the Immaculate Heart from St. Gabriel's and the Catholic Home Bureau also assisted at the hospital during the early days of the epidemic, until new conditions demanded their aid in caring for the children at the Home Bureau and elsewhere. The Sisters of Mercy have charge of 6 parish schools in the diocese. In all these parishes, the sisters nursed the sick and cared for the afflicted in private homes. End of Part 5.